Hi guys, welcome to my fairytale modding tutorial. Today we're going to be obviously modding fairytale, but more specifically we're going to be using a add-on or a third-party program known as 3DMigoto. This is essentially a program that allows us to add costume mods into fairytale. This video will be centered around 3DMigoto for the most part. I will not be directly modding game files or anything like that in this video. You may have noticed that this video is quite long. I do apologize for that, but there is quite a lot to cover in this video. So it did take me quite a while to make this as well, partly due to how much there is to cover, and some techniques changed along the way that kind of forced me to rewrite some sections. So I do apologize about the choppy nature of this video, but it has been recorded over a long period of time. That being said, the best way to get through this video is going to be in the top pinned comment. I pinned timestamps. It's going to be your best bet for finding what you're looking for. If you're looking for just the basic sections, you'll find those in the description. That's going to be the timestamps for the time bar, so you can drag through the video and see which sections you want to go to. But the pinned comment is going to have the more detailed stuff. So I want to go over how and what you need to start getting into this. But first I want to cover a couple of things. So you might be asking yourself, how much knowledge do you need going into this? So it really depends on how far you want to take this. If you want to do some very simple mods, you're not going to need anything. You can follow along and learn some simple stuff like removing some items of clothing and such. But if you want to get into the more complicated stuff like changing the colors of things and maybe even full costume mods, it's going to take a little more work, and I do highly recommend having 3D modeling experience going in. That being said, I did try to make this video with everyone in mind. So whether you have little to no experience or a lot of experience, I kind of wanted to make this video to cover all aspects. So I try to go at a pace that suits that as much as I can. That being said, if you are looking for the more advanced stuff, that will be towards the end of the video. I'll have a timestamp for like the advanced tips section. That's like where all the weight painting and stuff is going to be if you're looking for that. But the beginning part of this video is going to be covering the beginner stuff, the very beginner mods. So I'll be doing some mod walkthroughs start to finish on some very simple stuff. And I'll work up and it's going to get harder from there. And that's going to be kind of the format of this video. So you're probably wondering, what is 3DMigoto and how exactly does this work? So 3DMigoto is a tool that allows us to view the various objects that make up a scene in a game. So if I switch through these objects here, we can see these different indexes, essentially. And with 3DMigoto, we can take, say, this clothing one here, and we can modify it. Tell it to, instead of rendering that, we're going to have it render our own thing, and it can look something like this. So this is something that I made, and that's essentially it. So you're essentially just creating your own content and having 3DMigoto render that instead of what the game wants. So it's an indirect way of modding without actually changing anything in the game files. All right, so let's go ahead and go over some of the things that you're going to need to get started. If you're not already, I highly recommend joining our Discord. That's going to have a lot of tools and resources and information on how to get started. The first thing you're going to need is the BASEMOD, obviously, which you can find here on our Discord channel. If you go to the tutorial section, you'll see BASEMOD setup. And here you can find the latest version. If you don't have Discord, you can also find this linked in the description down below to the original post on Lovers Lab. But do be aware you do need an account to download that. So once you've gone ahead and downloaded this, we can go ahead and install it. So what you're going to want to do is navigate to your fairytale directory. Once in your fairytale directory, your folder should look something like this. I got some extra stuff in here, you can ignore that. But you're going to take the files that you downloaded, unzip them, and then you should see all these. You're just going to drag these straight into the fairytale folder here, and that will be it. You will have that installed. And that should come with a mods folder. That's going to be the important part there. Once you have that installed, the next thing you're going to need, if you plan on working with textures, you're going to want to download paint.net. And this is what paint.net looks like. There's a reason we're using paint.net, which I'll go over later, but it's going to ensure that we get the correct textures exported. I have a link down below to the website, but if you Google paint.net, you should go to a website that looks like this, and you can just download it from here for free. Just going to go to download. and get it on Windows 10 and go ahead and install that. Next thing you're going to need if you want to do any kind of complex modding, you're definitely going to need Blender. The easiest way to get Blender is going to be on Steam. So if you go to Steam, you can just search up Blender and that'll have the most up-to-date version there. That being said, I also want to mention that I am using Blender 2.9 throughout this video. You can use older versions of Blender if you like, but in this video I'll be using 2.9. Once you have Blender installed, go ahead and open that up because we do have something that we need to set up real quick. What we're going to need is an add-on that we're going to add to Blender that's going to allow us to import files from Fairytale. This add-on can be found in our Discord channel if you go to the Tools channel. And if you scroll all the way to the top, we can find 3DMigoto Blender plugin. And there's been some confusion in the past on how to install this, so I just kind of want to show that process here. So if I open this link here, you're going to see all this text. All you need to do is right-click on the word raw here, and we can save this link as, and it's going to say py, so a .py file, which is exactly what we want. And you can go ahead and save it just like that. Once you've saved it, we're going to go back to Blender, and we're going to go to Edit, and we're going to go to Preferences. If you're on an older version of Blender, I'm pretty sure you go to File and then User Preferences. But once we're here, we're going to go ahead and click on Install. And we're going to find where we downloaded that file. And once you found and imported it, you should see something that looks like this. You're just going to make sure that this box is checkmarked. And then down here, we can go to Save Preferences. Now you should see, if you go to File, you should see under Import some new options at the bottom here. And under Export, you should also see 3DMigoto raw buffers. All right, and that is all we need to set up Blender. That's really all of the things that you need downloaded and installed to get started. All of the important links and stuff will be down below in the description, and of course the Discord is going to have all that stuff as well. All right, and without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the main content of this video, and we're going to start creating mods. All right, so the first mod example we're going to take a look at is object removal. So let's remove one piece of clothing in this example. Press 0 on the number pad to open the overlay. Press the numbers 7 and 8 to cycle through the various index buffers. Once we find something that we want to remove, we're going to press 9 on the keyboard to copy the index buffer hash to the clipboard. Next, we're going to back out to our Fairytale directory, wherever that's located. We're going to open that. We're going to go into the mods folder and make a new folder. We're going to name that whatever we like. Make a new text document. Name it whatever you like. And change the extension to any.ini. Hit yes. And if that option did not pop up for you, make sure you go into the View tab and make sure that File Name Extensions is turned on. Let's open that up. We're going to make a texture override for this section. And then give it a name. We're working with her armor, so I'm going to call it armor. And then make sure you have those brackets on each end just like that. Next, we're going to define the hash. So hash equals, and then we're going to paste in what we copied to the clipboard. Now we have to tell it what we want it to do. We're going to say handling equals skip. Now we can save our any file. Go back to Fairytale. Press plus on the number pad to reset the hunting buffer, and then F10 to reload all mods. All right, and there you have it. That's a very basic example of an index removal mod. Moving on, let's do something with a little more complexity. Let's go ahead and go into Heaven's Wheel armor for this example. Now, not every costume piece is contained to a single index buffer. You're going to see that when we skip through the buffers on this particular model, you'll see that almost all of Urza disappears with this one index buffer. What this means is that there's most likely multiple objects contained within this buffer. So if we wanted to skip one thing on this, let's say we want to make a mod that removes her wings. We're going to have to do some extra steps in order to make this work. So let's start the process off just like before. We're going to search through the index buffers until the wings disappear. So the wings have disappeared here. We're going to copy the index buffer hash to the clipboard just like before. We're going to back out and we're going to make a new folder in our Fairytale mods directory. I'm going to name it Urza Wing Removal. We're going to make another ini file just like before. Open that up. We're going to define a texture override. I'm going to name it wings. Define a hash. Hash equals, and then paste what we had copied to the clipboard. Handling equals skip, just like before. And we're going to save that. Now let's reset with plus on the number pad and F10 to reload. All right, so we've removed her wings, but we want to bring back those other pieces. So let's go ahead and do that. What we're going to need to do is a frame analysis dump. So what that's going to do is essentially take a 3D screenshot of all the objects in the scene and export it into text files and texture files. So let's go ahead and do that. First, we're going to press F2 on the keyboard to disable the mods that we've done so far. Next, we're going to press F3 and make sure that it says dump body and costume is enabled in the bottom corner here. We're going to press Shift F3 next to make sure that it says dump UI disabled in the bottom corner. Now that we've set up the frame dump options, we're going to open our overlay by pressing 0 and press F8 to take that 3D snapshot. So now if we go into our fairy tale directory, we're going to notice that we have a new folder called frame analysis. So this is a bunch of text files, a bunch of texture files. We're going to go over the texture files later, but right now we're really just interested in the text files. So what we need to do in here is search these files for the hash of the index buffer that the wings are located on. So we already started that, so we got the hash right here. Going to copy that, and then I'm just going to paste that in here and search for it. So I have 3 text file results. We're going to ignore these. So let's go ahead and open these 3 text files and see what we got. So this basically means that we have 3 objects with the same index buffer. So which one is the one we want? Let's go ahead and try out each of these. The section we're interested in is first index. The first index will tell 3DMigoto which section to remove. So we're going to try 0 first. So let's go ahead and make a new section here. We're going to tell it match first index equals, and then we're going to do 0 first. Make sure you have this with underscores just like that. I'm going to save that, and we're going to try that out and see what it does. So we got to re-enable mods by pressing F2, and we're going to press F10 to reload mods. And so let's see, that removed the body, so that's not what we wanted. So we know that we don't need first index 0, so let's go ahead and close that file. So we got 2 options left here. So let's go ahead and try this number right here. I'm just going to go ahead and highlight this, copy it, and paste it right in here. Let's save, go back to Fairy Tale, and F10 to reload. And there we have it. So we have removed the wings from this index buffer, but we've actually removed just a little too much here. It looks like we've removed a part of the dress. If this was your goal, then you've finished the mod. Maybe you actually kind of like this and you just want to get rid of this bottom piece here. So I'm going to go over 2 different things here. We're going to go over filling in this section, and we're going to go over removing this bottom section. So removing the bottom section is actually super easy. So that would be just searching through these index buffers. We're going to see where that is. And I see that's right here. So I'm just going to quickly copy that to the clipboard. We're going to make a new section in here, a new texture override. And we're going to name this whatever we like. I'm just going to name it bottom dress. All right, so I'm just going to say hash equals, we're going to paste that in from the clipboard. And we don't need to give it a match first index section because the entire index needs to be removed. So we're just going to give it a handling and say skip. I'm going to Control S to save. We're going to go back to Fairy Tale. Always want to press plus to reset, and then F10 to reload. And here we go. This is the bottom part of the dress removed. Pretty cool looking mod. But let's say we wanted to keep the whole bottom part of the dress in. So we got to get rid of this section here. I'm just going to delete that. Control S to save. F10 reload. All right, so we want to fill that in. So we're actually going to go over to Blender now. So go ahead and open Blender. Once you're in Blender, you can remove everything from the scene. We're going to go to File, Import, and 3DMigoto Frame Analysis Dump. If you don't see these options here, then you haven't set up the add-on, which I did in the first part of this video. Go ahead and pause and do that if you haven't already. I'm going to click on this here, and we're going to find our Fairytale directory once again. We're going to look for that frame analysis folder. And in here, we're actually going to just highlight everything we see, and we're just going to import that in. Alright, so just pausing the video real quick here. While I was editing, I actually learned a new technique for finding the first index that makes it a lot faster, so that you can think of this as an alternate way of finding it. So instead of looking through the files, you can actually just click on a piece here in Blender, and if you're on the Object Properties tab, you can go to Custom Properties, and it'll say 3DMigoto first index and whatever that index is right here. Anyway, back to the video. Alright, so now we have Urza here in Blender. I'm going to go ahead and work on removing just the wings here. So I'm going to hide everything else but the wings. And we see that this one object has the dress, it has a bunch of other things on it. But all we need to do here is remove the wings in Blender manually. So I'm going to tab into Edit Mode here. And if you see all these floating vertices, you can actually ignore these. So we're just going to go to Face Selection here so we don't have to look at that. And I'm going to just quickly remove the wings real quick here. Now with the wings highlighted, I'm just going to press Delete. And I can exit Edit Mode and go back to Object Mode. And we're going to go ahead and highlight this object. For export, we're going to go to Export 3DMigoto Raw Buffers. And we're going to export this into our mod folder that we made. Urza Wing Removal. I'm going to give this a name. I always like to do the name of the character I'm working on, underscore, and then what it is. So in this case, it's wings. So I like to label it just like that. It makes it nice and easy. So if you take a look in your mods folder now, you're going to see that we have a couple new files. These are the vertex buffer, index buffer, and format files. We need to link in our any document to the index buffer and vertex buffer files. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is add some sections here. We're going to do VB0 and IB, so that's vertex buffer and index buffer. And we're going to give this a name just like this. And then in this case, I'm going to name it wings. And then VB for vertex buffer. Let's go ahead and copy this down to the next line and change the VB to IB for index buffer. Next, we still have the handling set to skip, which we actually want to leave it on. So we want to skip the draw call the game is making and tell it to make our own draw call. So we're going to say draw indexed, just like that, equals auto. Perfect. Next, we're going to go down a bit here, and we're going to copy these sections in here. Going to get one like that. One right there. Somewhere, doesn't really matter where. Put some brackets around them. Okay, for the vertex buffer section, we're going to say type equals buffer with the capital B, just like that. And we have to define a stride. We're going to come back to the stride. Let's get the rest of the code in here real quick. File name equals, and this is going to be the file name that we made in Blender. So I made it easy to remember. It was Urza underscore wings dot VB. And then for index buffer, we're going to do the same again. Type equals buffer. Except this time, we're not going to have a stride. It's going to be format equals R16 underscore uint. Just like that, all caps. And we're going to give that a file name as well. File name equals Urza underscore wings dot IB this time. Just gonna make this look a little nicer here. Alright, so we gotta get that stride in there. Alright, so a real easy way to find the correct file in here is going to be actually here in Blender. With the object that we're modding highlighted, you can actually see exactly the file name that we're looking for. So we know that this is number 53. So if we head into our frame analysis folder, we'll see that we have some 53s here. We're looking for the one with VB0, and it's a text document. All right, and here it is, number 53 right here. You can see that it matches up here with that file name. And we're going to open that up to find the stride, which we see is 52 right at the top there. And an alternate way to find the stride, if you don't want to go through the files, is going to be here in Custom Properties, and you're going to see 3DMigoto stride 52. So let's head back into our any file and just type in 52. And we can File, Save, and go back to Fairytale, and we're going to press plus to reset, just out of good habit, and F10 to reload. And there you go, we've removed her wings, and we've kept the dress intact. So moving on from working with index buffers, now let's take a look at working with textures. In this example, I'm going to make a color modification to this Kagura outfit here. Before we get started with that though, I want to go over the 3 different types of textures that we'll be working with in Fairytale. If you open the overlay and do a frame dump analysis, and if we head over to the frame analysis folder, we can see all of the different textures that have been dumped from the scene. If you go into a large icon view, you'll be able to see some previews of each one. I'm going to go ahead and open 3 files here using paint.net, which is essential for saving textures. I'll go over that in a second here. But first off, what we have here are 3 different types of textures. So for Kagura here, we have her main color or albedo texture, and that's just going to be the different colors that make up the model that we see there. We have the ambient occlusion map, which is, as you can see here, it's a bunch of shadows and details and such that you can see in the in-game model as well. And then lastly, we have a normal map, which not a lot of models do have in Fairytale, but some of them do. These add a little bit of extra detail to the model. Usually you're not going to have to worry about editing these two if you're just doing something like a color modification. So in this example, we're just going to be editing this one. So like I mentioned, we're using paint.net for a very specific reason. I myself am not 100% sure why it is like this, but editing these texture files in other programs like Photoshop or whatever, and then saving them from those programs results in washed out textures. And I can show an example of that later. But for now, I'm just going to show the process of how to correctly save textures so that way you don't have that problem. So the process is always going to be like this. So you have your frame dump, you have your textures. You're going to want to open the texture that you want to work with inside of paint.net. And then from here, you can edit the texture, or you can copy the texture and work on it in a program like Photoshop. So I'm just pasting it in Photoshop here. And then here you can edit it how you like, copy it, and then bring it back over to paint.net. So real quickly here, I'm going to edit this texture file and show you what I mean. So just in this quick example, my goal was to kind of create this color scheme for Kagura. So I'm going to be basing it off this. I'm just going to quickly fast forward through my editing process. I don't want to go too much into how to do the editing. This is more a video about how to work with modding Fairytale. So I'm going to fast forward through the editing here. Okay, so I think that these colors will work pretty well. I've kind of color matched them as best as I can. One thing to note is that when you make colors, they tend to be a little darker in game. So I always like to lighten them up just a little bit lighter than I actually wanted. So this is a tad bit lighter than the sample image I have here. Just one thing to keep in mind. So once you've done your editing in another program, you can copy that, bring that back in your paint.net document and paste it in. From here we can save this, and you're going to save this as a PNG file. We're going to want to head to the Fairytale folder, find the mods folder, and I'm just going to make a new folder for this mod. And I'm just going to name this clothes. We're going to want to save this as the default settings here. Next, we need to set up our any files we've done in our previous mod examples. I'm going to go into my new folder here. Going to make a text document. Make sure to give it that any extension. There we go. And as we've done in the previous mods, it's going to be a texture override. And we got to get the hash from Fairytale, so I'm going to find the hash here real quick. Pressing 8 to skip through the index buffers. And this appears to be the main buffer here, so I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. Paste that in. Alright, the next line we need to do is going to be as follows. So what I have here is ps-t0 equals resource replace texture, and then I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to say it's clothes. That's what we're working with. So ps-t0 relates directly to color textures. So this, remember how I said there's 3 different types. So we have ps-t0 for this one, for the main color texture. For ambient occlusion maps, we have ps-t2. And then for normal maps, it would be ps-t3. So if you're editing those, you would change this line to match that as follows. But we are working with color texture, so I'm going to leave this as ps-t0. I have resource replace texture, and I've named this clothes. Next, I need to copy this and create that on a new line with some brackets around it. And we're going to tell it the file name that it needs to find. And if I remember correctly, I named that clothes.png. Let's go ahead and save that and see what happens in game. So I'm going to press plus to reset, F10 to reload. Okay, not too bad. There's a couple things that need to be fixed here. I need to add the green to the skirt on the top, bottom, and the legs need to be fixed. So let's go over fixing the legs first. So the reason that we have this problem on the legs is because this particular index buffer probably has multiple objects on it. So we're going to need to use a match first index line in order to fix this, which I did show earlier in this video, but we're going to go over it real quick again because this applies to textures as well. So we would add the line match first index equals, and we need to find the correct index. So let's go ahead and take a guess. Let's see if it's 0. I don't think it will be, but you never know. It's always good to try. Let's try that out. Okay, that actually worked. I was not expecting that. All right. So that worked first try. I got really lucky there, but if that didn't work, what we would have done is go into the frame analysis folder and search for this hash here. I'll just show you real quick. If you didn't find that on index 0, you would search for the hash. And you see we have 3 results. We would open these. And there are 3 different things. So I tried first index 0 first, and that happened to work. But there are 2 other objects on that buffer that could have been it too. So that is something to keep in mind. So now that I've fixed the top, I need to make sure that the skirt is green. The reason I didn't color this correctly the first time was because I was not aware of where the skirt is on this. You can see that I was able to guess pretty well where the colors of everything else were, but there's no real indication of where the skirt is on this. So in order to find that out, I'm actually going to need to open this in Blender to do some more texture work. So let's go ahead and go into Blender here. Once we're in Blender, we're going to import our frame analysis dump like we did in the beginning of this video. We're going to find the location of our Fairytale folder and make sure we're using the latest frame analysis folder here. And I'm going to copy this all in. So here we have Kagura in Blender now. So let's go ahead and take a look at this skirt. The first thing you're going to notice is that part of this skirt is actually missing, as well as part of the hair and some other things. I should probably mention this now, but there are certain objects that will not ever load into Blender. These things include stuff like clothing or hair pieces, things that have physics to them, or colliders and stuff. They have special properties that Blender just can't load. So there are ways to edit these. I will not be going over that right now. That is more of an advanced topic. But for now, we can still edit the colors of those things, and I'm going to show how. So for the top half of this, we can actually go ahead and take a look at this. So we're going to go into the shading tab on Blender. I'm just going to select the piece I'm working with. We're going to say new. And here we can drag in our texture that we want to see. So if I head in here, this is the texture that we saved. So I'm just going to drag this into Blender. Connect this up with color and base color. And here we can see a little preview of the texture on the model. So I'm going to go ahead and go into UV editing now. So if we go into edit mode on this model, we can get a better idea of how the geometry relates to the UV map. So if I go ahead and turn on UV sync up here, I can highlight the skirt over here, and we can actually see that this rectangle down here is where the skirt is. So knowing this, I can actually go into Photoshop and color in this area here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. I'm just going to desaturate this just a tad, lighten up just a bit, because everything appears a little bit darker in fairy tales. So, all right, now that that's done, I can copy this. We need to bring it back into paint.net, paste that in, and we can just hit the save icon up here. Now if we head back to fairy tale and press F10 to reload, we can see that we got the green color we wanted on half of the skirt. Now this next part of the skirt is on a different index buffer, so we're going to make a new line in our ini file. So I'm going to find where that buffer is. Going to copy that to the clipboard. Going to make a new texture override. Just going to name it skirt bottom. Hash equals, I'm going to paste that in from the clipboard. So we're not exactly able to open this bottom part of the skirt in Blender. So we're going to have to do some guesswork here. So I'm going to have to guess that that's probably going to belong to the same texture. I don't think it's going to have its own texture. So let's go ahead and try adding in the same line here. So that way it will call on loading this texture for the skirt bottom as well. So let's try that and see if that works. And look at that, it worked perfectly. So that's the very basic process of editing and saving textures correctly. I do want to show real quickly what happens if you use Photoshop outside, just as an example. So if I were to save this from Photoshop and I were to overwrite my other one, we're just going to save it as a PNG just like we did from paint.net. I'm going to press F10 to reload, and you can see how the colors turned out. It's a very strange phenomenon. I'm still not sure why it happens, but you know, the fix is to always load your textures from your frame dump into paint.net, and then once you're done, save them from there as well, and you'll never have any problems. But if I just quickly save this up here and go back, F10 to reload, and it is fixed. Next, I want to just very briefly mention, if you wanted to edit the occlusion or normal maps, you would just add in extra lines here. So this would just be something like this. This would be T2 for occlusion and then T3 for normal. And then I would do something like this. And I'm not going to go over this. I'm not going to show an example of it, but that's how the lines would look. And then down here you would need to copy these lines and make file name locations for those as well. So that's how you would do that. Alright, so that's pretty much the basics of working with textures. Later in the video, or perhaps in another video, I'll go into some advanced examples, but that is essentially the basics that you need to know. Alright, so I'm now going to go over the process of transferring meshes between costumes. So in this example, we're going to be transferring Lucy's skirt from her regular outfit over to her swimsuit model. The first step in this process is going to be doing a frame dump analysis of both of these costumes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick, and I'm going to head over to Blender. Alright, so here we are in Blender. I've imported both of these models. I just have the regular outfit offset on the x-axis over here. This is just a personal preference of mine. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I just like to see both of them at the same time. Anyway, so the goal here is to move the skirt over to this mesh. So let's go ahead and do that. The first step is going to be to isolate the skirt here. So I'm just going to go into edit mode. I'm going to go into face selection up here. And we're going to just select these faces here. I'm just pressing L on the keyboard to select linked vertices. Just going to grab all these little pieces here. And I press H to hide what I've selected so far so I can get the rest of it. Alright, looks like I got everything. I press Alt-H to bring that back. And then we're just going to press P to separate, and we're going to press selection here. Now that that has been separated, we can actually get rid of all the other stuff here. So I'm going to hide that for a second. And I'm just going to delete all this. I'm going to bring that back, Alt-H. And this is over here now, so what I'm going to do is press N to open this little tab here, and I'm going to go to the top here on Item, and I'm just going to change the location back to 0. So now I have that exactly where I want it. So now comes the process of transferring the weights over. So there's two ways to go about doing this. There's the way that I like to do that has the least amount of problems and works the best, I've found. And that is to rename vertex groups and to essentially manually transfer the weights. And there's also an automatic method that we can do in Blender that will automatically transfer the weights from one mesh to another. But that method has mixed results. So I'm going to go over the first one that works the best, and I can go over the second one after. Alright, so the first step here is going to be to make a duplicate of the mesh that we want to transfer to. So we need to first choose what we're going to be transferring to. So hiding the skirt for a second, let's take a look at the swimsuit model here. So normally in this situation, I'd probably choose to transfer this to the body mesh. But this body mesh is in two pieces. So that's going to make it a little difficult because there's weights specific to this piece here and then weights specific to this part here. And that's not going to work out for our skirt. So since we don't have a single body mesh, we're going to have to choose this bikini bottom as the transfer object. This is going to have all the weight groups that we need. So with that in mind, I'm going to bring back our skirt here. And I'm just going to make a duplicate of this bikini mesh. I'm going to press Shift D, and that's going to make a duplicate. If I right click, and then I can press G to move, and then X to move on the X axis. I'm just going to move this over here. All right, so the next step is going to be to go up here to edit, and we're going to uncheck lock object modes. So we're going to want to make sure that is unchecked. It's going to make it easier to go between the weight paints on both of these. So next we're going to click on the skirt here. We're going to go up here to weight paint. Going to click on the bikini here, and then also go to weight paint. So now I can switch between these. Next, toggle X-ray up here. It's going to make it easier to see. And we're going to go over this little green triangular tab thing here. And we're going to expand the Vertex Groups tab. Up to the top here, starting with 0. Here we can see that 0 has some weight applied to it. This is weight paint. We're not going to be painting or anything, so make sure you don't click anywhere in here. We're just going to be transferring these. So the first step in transferring these over is going to be to isolate all of these groups that have weight applied to them. So over here in vertex groups, I can see that 0 has weight applied to it. So I'm going to put this little lock symbol on it. And we're just going to go down 3. And we're going to go down in groups of 3 until we find something. The reason I'm going in 3s is because the way that these frame dumps work, there's only going to be weights on every 3, so 0, 3, 6, 9, etc. so the other ones can be ignored. But I'm just going to hold this down and we're going to see where they are. So there's one here, number 45, just lock that. Let's go down 3, and there's one right there, down 3. Nothing on that one. All right, and that's all of them. Definitely doesn't hurt to go through and make sure that you didn't miss anything. You definitely don't want to miss anything. But I think that we are good on this one. Once you've done that, we're just going to go over here, this little down arrow, and we're going to hit delete all unlocked groups. Next, we can unlock these here. And we need to temporarily rename these. We're just going to rename these A or whatever you really want. I just like to do A. We just need to give it something other than what it has. It really doesn't matter what it is. Now that we've done that, we're going to go back to the top. And we need to compare these groups to the groups over here. So let's go to the top of this one. So we have 0, and then over here, we have that same one. You can see that those are matching in color. So I'm going to rename this 0. Let's go down. So we got to find this big orange group here. So let's look through here. And there we go. That's going to be 30. Next, we have a very light blue along the side here. So let's try to find that over here. All right, so I don't think it's this one. This one's a little too bright on the bottom here. Let's see if there's another one. There we go. You can see a little bit of light blue in there. Kind of hard to see, but it is there. That's going to be the right one. So that's number 33. Going to the next side. Number 36. And this is going to be the same one, despite it not having like that orange. You have to kind of imagine where that would be. So you can see that, if this were to be cut like a bikini, right? It'd be cut like right here. Or maybe more like right here. So you'd only get a little bit of that blue, and you can see that that's where that is. So you have to imagine what this would look like if it continued down. So that's why I'm choosing that one. Also, there's no other groups that it could possibly be if you look through there. So this is number 39. So let's go ahead and put that in. And then our next one, number 42. Now that we've renamed our groups, we can go back into object mode. And we can delete this little thing over here. Just gonna turn off X-ray to make it a little easier to see. And we're not done yet. We need to join the skirt to the bikini mesh here because it is still on a separate object. So the order in which you do this is very important. So always make sure that you are selecting the object that you're transferring first and then the object you're transferring to second. After you do that, you can shift click onto the other one and press Ctrl J to join those together. Going to go into weight paint and we're going to double check to make sure everything looks good. So we had 0 here, that looks good. Those look like they match up. There's that one, that looks good. Yep, those all look pretty good, so we are good on that. Go back to object mode, and we are good to export this now. That is essentially the process though. That is how you transfer weights. So that this mesh is done, but we're gonna check it out in game and make sure that it all works out correctly. And then we're also gonna go over how to fix the textures as well. So let's go ahead and export this. I'm gonna highlight that, export, raw buffer. We're gonna go to our mods folder, and we haven't made a folder yet, so I'm gonna make a new one here. And we're going to save this as Lucy skirt. With that saved, we just need to set up our ini file now. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and open that up, and we're going to make a texture override. And name it skirt hash equals handling equals skip. And let's grab the hash from Fairytale. So we need to find the one that would apply to the bikini mesh, right? So let's go ahead and look for that. So whichever one makes that one disappear. Here we go. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. Let's save that and then make sure that it works in game. F10. Okay, yeah, that works out. All right, so we're still removing too much of this mesh. We actually need to just remove the swimsuit for this one. Because if you remember here in Blender, we have this all-in-one object. So we need to make sure that this part is still in game. So we need to get the first index. So let's go ahead and look into our frame analysis folder and find that first index. So I'm in the frame analysis folder for the swimsuit model. I'm just going to do a search for this hash here. Only got two objects here. So one of these is probably going to be 0. Here we have first index 0 and then that one. Probably should have tried 0 first. Let's just try it out. Let's see what that does in game. Okay, yeah, that was the right one. So I actually didn't need to open that, but that's fine. So we're just going to close out of these. Next, we need to tell it where these modified files are. So I'm actually going to do a little shortcut here and just copy some code over from another one that I made because I don't like having to type that in every single time. So I'm just going to copy this stuff in here. Just remove the texture lines for now. We don't really need that right now. I'm only interested in this stuff. Rename this skirt. And then we're also going to need these here. Gonna rename that to match up there, skirt. Of course, these need to match the file name that we saved, which was Lucy_skirt. And we don't know if this is the right stride or not, but let's hope that it is and see what happens. If not, we can always change it. So I've saved that up. Let's see what happens in game. F10 to reload. And we have this. If you ever see this happen in your game, you know that you have input the wrong stride, most likely. I haven't really seen this happen in any other situations. So if you see this, it's the wrong stride. So we're just going to go back and we're going to find the right one. So the best way to go about doing this, as we've shown before in this video, is to click on the mesh that we're interested in here. And we're going to find this number up here, which is 47VB0. So with that in mind, let's go back to our frame analysis folder. For the swimsuit, and we're going to find 47VB0. And we're looking at the text document one. Open that up, and we can see at the very top here that the stride is 56. So let's go ahead and change that to 56. We're going to save that up, back to Fairytale, and F10 to reload. And there you have it. That is the entire process behind transferring a mesh between costumes. So we've transferred the mesh. Obviously the textures are not right. At this point, I do like to usually run around and make sure that it looks okay in game. Which it looks like it's working out okay. So we know that we've done the process correctly. Alright, so before we get into fixing the textures, let's go ahead and take a look at that second method of transferring weights automatically using Blender. Alright, so the first step is going to be to remove all the vertex groups from the mesh that we are transferring. So I removed all the vertex groups on the mesh here. I just went to the down arrow and I hit delete all groups. After we've removed all the vertex groups, we're going to click on the transfer mesh, so the one that we want the weights from. So I'm clicking on the bikini, then I'm going to shift click onto the one we're transferring to, which is going to be the skirt. We're going to go up here, we're going to go to weight paint, weights, transfer weights, go to this little down arrow, and I apologize, my little mouse cursor is blocking this, but just ignore that. We're going to click on source layer selection, go to by name, and then vertex mapping is going to be the important part. This is what determines how well this actually works. And I have had the best luck with nearest face vertex. You can try other ones if you like, but this is the one that I recommend because it works the best. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now if we go into our vertex groups here, we can actually see all the new groups that it's added. So if we scroll through here, you can see the weights. All right, so now that we've done that, I've exited weight paint mode, and I'm just going to join this up with the bikini mesh, Control J, and this is good to export. So I'm gonna go ahead and export this. And I don't want to overwrite my other one. I actually want to make a new one, so just because this is an example. So I'm gonna name this 2. And I'm just gonna quickly go back into my any file here and make sure that loads the correct one. And then if I go back here and press F10, you can see that this method does indeed work. And that was a lot faster than what we did before, but you can see that if I zoom in here, it didn't work perfectly. I didn't transfer the weights down here the way we wanted, which is why if you want a really smooth transition, I definitely recommend the previous method that I showed. All right, so I've gone ahead and reverted back to a point where the skirt was working correctly. Now that I have my mesh in place, we're going to go ahead and fix the textures how we like. In this particular example, I'm going to be showing how to transfer this texture over here. So we're going to have to combine that texture with the bikini texture. So the first step here, we're going to take a look at the textures that are involved. So I'm going to go ahead and head over to my frame dump. Here we can see that we just have 2 textures. We're going to have the color and the occlusion map to worry about. So I'm going to go ahead and open those in paint.net. And I'm also, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and look at my other texture that we'll be importing. That's going to be the color texture. It's going to be this one here. So I'm going to go ahead and save these as PNGs for now, so we can use them in Blender. I'm just going to save these to the mods folder here. So this is the occlusion map, so I'm just going to name that bikini occlusion. Save that. I'm just going to do the same for the rest of these. So I've saved the textures to my mods folder, and I actually forgot to save this file. So what I'm going to do is just delete all this, and we're going to import the raw buffer files. This is also a good method not just for if you forget to save, but if you want to open someone else's mod and take a look at it. So I'm just going to my mods folder, and we're going to import these index buffer and vertex buffer files. And you can see it just imported the modified stuff. First thing I'm going to do here is go to the shading tab. I'm going to go ahead and make a new material. And let's first take a look at our occlusion map. This one's going to have the most impact on what we're actually doing. I'm going to go ahead and go over to UV editing. I'm going to set this to texture. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on UV sync selection up here. And we're going to go ahead and just highlight the skirt. And I'm going to deselect the bikini that it also highlighted. So now I've just got the skirt selected, and we can see the parts that we need to fix. So these are overlaying on top of the UV map from the bikini. So we need to find empty spots for these. Some good spots I'm already seeing would maybe be this corner. That doesn't seem to be anything useful there. Maybe here or there. But the one I'm noticing the most that has the most area is going to be kind of in here. So the reason I think this area would be good is because it has so much empty space. We do have some image data here, which doesn't really matter because you can see that the UV map doesn't line up there. So we're going to erase these in paint.net to give us some blank space to work with. And we're going to move our items in here. So I'm going to go over to paint.net and we're just going to make these white. I'm going to go ahead and save my changes, head back to Blender, and one quick easy tip, instead of reloading the entire texture, we can just press Alt-R, and that's a shortcut to reload the textures. So now that we have our empty space, we can start moving our stuff. All right, so we're going to make sure that we have UV sync selection enabled. We're going to make sure that we have face selection enabled. And I'm also going to turn on X-ray over here. And what I'm going to do first is just select the entirety of the skirt. And I press Shift L to deselect these two items here. This is going to deselect the bikini so we don't move those things around. All we want to move around is this stuff. So with these highlighted, I'm going to go ahead and press G on the keyboard. And we're just going to move this off to the side. With these moved off to the side, I now just need to bring these into an area that they're best going to fit into. So we've already cleared out the space here, so we have plenty of room to move these in. So what I'm going to do is take my objects here, and I'm just going to rotate them a bit to fit. I generally don't like to rotate things if I don't have to, but in this case, it should be okay. And I got pretty lucky with this one. We were able to fit this all in pretty nicely. Some textures will be harder than others. You just got to find spots to fit these things as best as you can. So now that I've fit these in, I just want to take a look at my bikini texture, make sure that's not going to affect anything. And that's a good blank space. We will see flowers here appear right here, but we're going to be editing this area as well. So we don't have to worry about that right now. I'm going to go ahead and export this. We're going to export a raw buffer file. And we're just going to overwrite our skirt that we already had. This is going to update the UV map, essentially, that we just did. So now that we've done that, we can press F10 to reload. So you can see we do have a bit of a change in game here. But this is not exactly the change we're looking for. We just have it kind of set up for us to make it a little easier. So now that we have this arranged the way we want, we need to export our UV map layout. So we're going to go up to the top here in Blender. We're going to click UV. We're going to click on Export UV Layout. I like to turn the fill opacity down to 0. We're going to say all UVs. And we're just going to save this somewhere. I'm just going to save this in the Lucy folder just so I keep everything together. Let's save it as that. That's fine. So I'm actually going to head into Photoshop for this part. This can be done in Paint.net if you prefer, but I do like this instead. So I'm just in my area that I saved our UV map layout. We're going to open this up. Okay, so you should see something like this when you're in Photoshop or whatever program you're using. I'm just going to hit Control A to highlight all this and then Control C to copy. And I'm just going to paste this in place on top of our UV map. And I also want to see it on top of this one as well. So now you can kind of get a good idea of why these things are appearing. So you can see that this is the back spot. In Fairy Tale, you can see that that's how it lines up like that. So we're going to add some things into here. What I like to do is turn down the opacity so we can just kind of barely see these. So let's do the color map first, since that one's going to be the easiest. Lucy's skirt is just a solid color, which that's going to make our job super easy. So we're just going to copy that. I'm just going to get the eyedropper tool and get this color right here. I'm going to very simply just kind of do something like this. Now, this part is a little concerning. You can see how this kind of overlaps here, but we know that that's not a problem because we can see that our UV map is just outside that. So I'm just going to get in here. And we got kind of a tight fit here, but that's okay. So I have this whole area. We're just going to fill this in and make a new layer. And we fill it in with that color that we copied. From here, we can hide our other thing, and this color map is done just like that. That's all we need. So let's go ahead and flatten the image. I'm going to copy this and bring it back to Paint.net, paste it in, and we are good to save that. So we're done here. Next up is we need to get the occlusion map data from the original outfit. So you can see that there's these little fine details here. So let's go ahead and find that file. We're going to go back to our frame dump. I probably should have grabbed this file earlier, but that's okay. And we're looking for clothing, and there it is. Open this up. And I'm going to need to actually save this as a PNG here, so let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and import the original Lucy frame dump. So I'm actually going to bring this in. So we're going to use that as a reference. That should be this one. Okay, so I have the regular Lucy loaded in Blender. I'm going to go over to shading. Make a new material. And we're just going to bring that thing that we just saved right in. Okay, so now we can use this as a reference to where to put those UV maps. So turn on UV sync, face selection. All right, so the top right area is the front skirt. And on here, our front skirt is right there. So in Photoshop, we're just going to do this one area at a time. Make it as easy as possible. Just going to copy this, paste it in, and let's take it back in Blender and see kind of how this fits. So you can see that it pretty much lines up pretty perfectly with this rectangle. So back to Photoshop here. Just gonna turn down the opacity on that. And we should be able to just rotate this. All right, so I know it matches with this one here. And for some reason, the scaling seems to be a bit off. Normally those should be already the right size, but it's okay. We can just scale this down. We're just gonna fit that in like that. So we know the back part is gonna be on the right side here. I'm gonna head back to Blender. I'm just going through and kind of doing the same thing here. Again, I shouldn't have to be scaling these. I don't know what happened, but that's okay. We're not scaling too much, so we won't lose any detail. It's okay if you have to scale a little bit. We're just going to fit those together. And then we have these pieces, which are the inside parts. Let's look at those over here. I'm going to hide this so I can see these better. Okay, so we see that these are supposed to be completely black, which actually makes this super easy. We can actually just take these, and we actually don't even need to put these over here. We already have black spots over here, so I'm actually going to hide these. Hide that. So I can just select all of this. And we're just going to move this into a black spot. Okay, so now that we have done this, so what we need to do is save our texture in Photoshop first. So I'm going to bring these back up. We don't need that UV map, obviously, so let's disable that. And we're going to flatten our image. Copy this and bring it into paint.net. We're going to overlay this with this one and save. In Blender, we're going to go ahead and export our new modified mesh here. So we're just going to export that right on top of what we already did. We're just going to export. Okay, and now we're almost done. We just got to set up our any file to find those color textures and the occlusion textures. So we're going to add in some new lines here. PST0 and PST2 for occlusion. And what we want is replace texture and then whatever we want to call it. Pretty simple stuff. We're going to copy this and do a new line with some brackets around it. File name equals. And this is just for this one right here. We're just copying that down. And we named these, so we want bikini.png for the color map. So that's bikini. And then this one would be bikini occlusion.png. Let's go ahead and save that. And let's try it out in Fairy Tale. F10 to reload. And there it is. We have brought over the colors correctly. We can switch between these. And one thing you'll notice is that the occlusions, the shadows, tend to get a little darker. This is just kind of a weird thing that happens. The fix for this is to actually just go into paint.net here and just kind of lighten up this image. So what I'll do is go into levels and I'll just kind of do something like this. Just kind of lighten it up a bit. And we can save that and we should be able to see the changes right away. Just F10. And let's see if that's kind of, yeah, that's a lot closer. So of course we still have the shadow of the belt here, which I'm not going to really show how to fix that. If you wanted to fix that, you could. You basically have to Photoshop these things out. So yeah, that's basically the process of that. This process can really be used for a lot of things. You can transfer skirts between costumes. You can transfer clothing from another model to, this one. It's not just for one character. You can bring clothing from other characters. And this method will also work for bringing meshes from outside of the game if you were using third-party stuff. So all of this can pretty much apply to that. All right, so congratulations if you've made it this far in the video. Then you have learned most of the basics that go into making mods for Fairy Tail. Going forward in the video from here on out, instead of doing full mods, I'm going to kind of just show some advanced tips. For this first part, we're going to take a look at weight painting and the easiest way to go about doing it with what we have. So in Fairy Tail, unfortunately, we don't have access to the actual bone structure. So we're going to have to do a little bit of a workaround in order to weight paint the way we want to. So I'm going to go over that here. In this example, I kind of want to show how I did weight painting with Carla here. If I disable mods, you can see that there's a lot of custom work that went into this. So with that came a lot of custom weight paint. And I learned a lot of helpful techniques with weight painting for this model. So I just want to show some examples of how that works. All right, so I've opened up my Carla model here in Blender. So let's take a look at the tail and skirt area. So in order to weight paint something, I like to isolate the area that I want to weight paint so I don't affect anything else. So I'm going to, in this case, we want to weight paint the skirt and the tail, for example. So what I'm going to do is select linked faces and just grab these individual things, and we're going to separate it from the model so we can work with these. So I've highlighted some stuff here. I'm going to hide it, see if I miss anything. Just going to grab the rest here. Okay, so now that I have this whole section highlighted, I'm going to press P. I'm going to separate by selection here. And I'm just going to hide everything else so that way we can kind of just see what we're working with. So I want to weight paint some stuff on here. So what we need to do first is go through our vertex groups and see which ones have weight on them. So each one that has weight on it, I'm just going to come through and lock those. All right, so I have all the weights I need selected. Now we're just going to go this down arrow and delete all unlocked groups. So now I just have the groups with weights on them. Normally, you won't see unnamed bone, so yours should just be numbers like 0, 3, 6, that kind of thing. So ignore that for now. But the next step here, to get into weight paint, we're going to need to create some bones for just these. So we're going to create 5 bones, since I have 5 groups that I'm working with. I'm just going to go back into object mode here. We're going to go up to add, armature, and single bone. So it appears down here at the bottom here. It's kind of small, so I'm just going to move this up and off to the side here and make it a little bigger so I can see it. Okay, so I'm no longer in X-ray mode. I'm just looking at the bone like this. So if you highlight it and press Tab, you should go into edit mode on this bone, and now we can duplicate this. So what I'm going to do is press Shift D and just create 5 of these. Next, we need to name these to match these vertex groups. Again, yours should be just regular numbers, so it should be a lot easier, but mine are these. So I'm just going to copy these full names over to each bone. So just go into edit mode on one of these bones, go to this little bone properties tab over here, and I'm just going to put the name in up here. I'm going to go to the next one and just kind of do this real quick. So that way I can come back and just change the numbers. It'll be a little easier. So I need 11, 12, 69, 70. If you have a lot of groups, something I like to do is to use the snipping tool on Windows to kind of just take a picture of it and keep it off to the side so we can remember which ones we need to name. So I'm just going to come back to the bones here. The second one needs to be 11, 12, 69, and 70 for the last one. So now that I've named these to match the vertex groups, we need to go over to the mesh. We're going to go to the modifier tab, and we're just going to add an armature deform. We're just going to hit armature right here. So now these two things are linked together, just like a normal model should be. This will allow us to weight paint normally. So we're just going to click on the armature, shift click onto the mesh here, and we're going to go into weight paint. So now with this, we can click on each of these bones, and you'll see that they are applied to each of these groups. And you can kind of move these around and see how they work. Pretty nice. Okay, so now that we have everything applied, we can, weight paint how we want to. What's nice here is if we go to the side panel by pressing N, and we go to Tools, we can go to Options and turn Auto Normalize on. And what this does is going to allow us to weight paint evenly across all these bones. So you can see that it usually looks like that. But if I add weight, it took it away from here. So it's keeping your weights even essentially. And that's going to be essential because you can't have your weights be uneven or we're going to have problems in game. So I'm just going to go back again. Another helpful tool is up here under weights. We have the normalize all option. If for some reason your mesh has weights that are messed up, you can hit normalize all and that will fix everything. If you are somewhat new to weight painting, I do recommend watching tutorials on it, but I can give a couple helpful tips here. And especially in the new version of Blender, some stuff that I wasn't even aware of until recently is how to weight paint through the mesh, for example. So you can see that if I put some paint right here, it only applies to that side, which obviously makes life very difficult. So if I undo that, there's a couple options you can do to fix this. That way you can just kind of paint through the whole mesh. What you're going to do is go up here to Tool. We're going to go to the Fall Off tab, and you're going to want to change the fallout shape to projected. And you're going to click on Advanced here and uncheck Front Faces Only. And I'm just going to leave Auto Normalize on. You always want to leave that on. So now if we go to Paint, you can see that it paints right through the mesh. Once you're done, of course, it'll be just like in the weight transfer tutorial. You can just delete this or leave it there, it doesn't matter. But we're going to bring the model back and we're just going to rejoin our edited mesh with the body or whatever it is that you're joining it with. And this is good to export in game and you'll be good to go. All right, so I've gone ahead and loaded up a very old model of mine. This was my first mod I ever made, and it has a ton of problems, so it's a good case to look at. I've already gone ahead and fixed this before, but this is the old version. So two things we're going to look at in this model is the outline thickness. We're going to go over how to fix outlines in case yours have become thick like this. I'm also going to go over fixing seams, and it's kind of hard to see, but there is like a noticeable seam in the mesh right here. And you can see it goes along here and then comes down along the back. The reason for this is because they are on different buffers. So if I go through the buffers here, you can see these are different objects. So I'm going to go over how to fix that. So I'm just going to bring this model into Blender. We're going to take a look at it. All right, so I've imported the modified files directly into Blender. So let's first go over removing outlines. So There used to be a program that we could use that would help us do this, but I've actually since learned a really easy, really super easy method of actually fixing this in Blender. So I'm going to show that method instead. So essentially what we have here, we can see that we have outlines that are working on the face. We have outlines that are working like on the hair, and that's pretty much it. Well, on the hands, we see the working outlines. Those are the right thickness. And you can check by going to the original model. So we can see that's how it's supposed to look. So what we're going to do is copy the properties of, say, the hands and apply them to the rest of the model. So in Blender, we know the hands work, so let's go ahead and do that. What we're going to do is isolate the hands. So I'm just going to take this, and I'm actually going to create a duplicate object of this. So I'm going to press Shift D and just create a duplicate, and I'm just going to put it over here because it doesn't really matter where it is. Now that it's over here, let's press P and separate it by selection, just like that. So we have it over here. And we know that pretty much everything got messed up outline-wise. So we're going to apply this to everything here. So we have 3 meshes we got to do this to. So what we're going to do is go over to our modifier tab. We're going to add a modifier. We're going to go to data transfer. For our source, we're just going to actually hit this little eyedropper tool, and we're just going to click on the hand like that. So now the hand is the source for the data transfer. And what we need to do is transfer the vertex color data. We're going to go into this tab here, so face corner data. We're going to check that. We're going to go down and hit vertex colors. After we've done that, we can go ahead and apply. And I'm going to hide this since we've already edited it, and we're going to do the same process to the rest here. Data transfer. Click on the hand. Face corner data. Vertex colors. Apply. Data transfer. Click on the hand. Vertex colors. And apply. So now what we've done is transfer all of the vertex colors from here to here. Now that we've done that, all we need to do is re-export these. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's go to File, Export, and we're going to be overwriting these. So in my case, I need to overwrite the correct ones here. So this was, top one was body, so I'm just going to overwrite Wendy body. And then this was the clothes, so I'm going to export that as Wendy clothes, overwrite that. And then last but not least, export, and that's Wendy legs. So now we have done that, we can go back into Fairy Tale and look at the right one. So alternative color, press F10 to reload, and you can see that the outlines have been fixed. Next thing we're going to do is fix this seam. So you can see the seam pretty well here in Blender. The reason it exists obviously is because these are 2 different objects. In order to see the seam more clearly, let's go ahead and disable outlines in Blender. So we're going to go up here and we're just going to go to outline so we can see how the lighting is affecting the seam. So what we're going to do to fix this is actually very similar to how we just fixed outlines. All right, so select both of the objects, and we're going to Shift D to create a duplicate, and we want to make sure it stays exactly in the same spot. I want to keep it right there. I'm going to hit Alt-I to select the inverse, so select everything else. I'm going to hide it. So now we just have our duplicated objects. Now that we have these, we're going to go ahead and join these together, just like that. So Control J, and we're going to go into edit mode. And what we need to do is make sure that these vertices, you can see that they're separated like this, they all need to be connected. So if these are already lined up, the easy way to do that would be select all. You can either use the search function and find merge by distance, or you can go up to mesh up here at the top, go to merge, and then by distance. And you can see at the bottom we've removed 1,691 vertices. So now we can see that that seam is completely gone. So what we're going to do is rename this at the top here. We're going to name this just transfer or something, whatever, or just something that you can remember. And we're going to hide it. Now let's go ahead and bring back our other stuff. So I'm going to keep that mesh hidden. And what we're going to do is highlight one of these objects. We're going to go to data transfer, just like before. For our source object, we're going to pick our transfer object that we made. And just like before, we're going to be picking face corner data. We're going to go down and hit custom normals. And if you look really closely, you can actually see the change that already took place. So if you click on this little icon here, you can toggle between the two different things. And you can see that the normals, essentially the lighting and the mesh, is changing. So that's perfect. So now we can go ahead and apply this. And we're going to do the same for our other piece here. We're going to go to data transfer, source transfer, face corner data, custom normals. Apply. And if I deselect, you can see that there's literally no seam here despite these being two different objects. So now that these are good to go, we can export these. So we're going to export it again. This was body and clothes. Go once again back to Fairy Tale, and we're going to keep an eye on this area here. I'm going to press F10. And you can see that seam has been removed. One thing I want to take a look at is vertex colors. I briefly mentioned before how vertex colors can affect the outline thickness of your mods, but it also can affect things like the shininess of the model as well. So I want to go over a third-party software here that we can use to fine-tune these properties. If you take a look at the description, I have a link to a Lover's Lab for this third-party software. This is Edit 3DMigoto. It's essentially a text editor that allows us to edit some stuff within the vertex buffer and index buffer files. You do need a Lover's Lab account to download this, so be sure to make an account and download it right here. Once you've downloaded it, it's as simple as opening the exe file here, and we're going to find our exported mod. So we just need to specify a format file. So I'm going to head into whatever mod it is that I'm loading in. So in this case, I'm going to be taking a look at Urza's armor. So I've gone ahead and already made a mod for that. So got the format file here. I'm going to open that. And then for vertex buffer file, you need to specify a source. So hit browse here, and it should bring you right to it. Just going to hit open. And then lastly, we need to specify an output, and that's going to be the same one. So I'm just going to click here. And we're good to hit load here. So you should see a bunch of stuff pop up here. Really, we're only interested in one section, and that is color here. So under color, I'm just going to expand this out a bit. We can see some values here. This relates to R, G, B, and A, so alpha. So you have the normal channels for RGB. We have 1 for the red channel, and then 0.502 for the alpha channel. So the alpha channel directly controls the outline thickness that we see in Fairy Tale. So here in this program, if you wanted to control outline thickness, we would go to Operation. We can go down to Color, and we can go to Replace, and we're going to type in all of these that we want to replace. So I'm just going to keep it at 1, 0, 0, and then we're changing this one. So I'm going to put this, for example, we're just going to put in 0. Execute. And you can see that all these have been changed. So now if I hit output, you can see that saved here, back to the game. And when I reload, you can see that it's removed outlines. If I do the opposite and put in a 1 for the last value, you're going to get the thickest possible outlines, as you can see here. So any value between 0 and 1 will control the thickness of that. One thing I did want to mention is some mods can come up different. This is another mod that I'm pulling up here. The format for color can come out something like this, and this is actually the same. So you can see here it's 255, 0, 0, and then 127. This is the RGB value instead of a number value. So 1 would be 255, that's the same thing. And then 0, 0, and then half of 255 is 127. So if you have that format, that's what you would do. So instead of doing between 0 and 1, you would do between 255 and 0. So this column here is going to directly affect the thickness of outlines. I'm just going to return this back to its original state. Okay, so outlines are back. So this column here, this is the red channel, and this will directly affect the shininess of your model. So if you look closely at these models, you can see that there is a certain reflection on the material here. You can see it better when you rotate the model. So this value is going to control how strong that is. So at 1, that's going to be maximum strength. And if I were to turn this down to 0, I think you can guess what it's going to do. So I've changed that to 0. Reload that, and it has removed all reflections from this material. And just like the other one, if we wanted to do somewhere in between, you can do that. Maybe I just want to have a slight amount of reflection. Maybe I'll do 0.2 or something. And you can see that I have just a slight reflection to it. And that's really all there is to vertex colors. It's going to directly affect outlines and shininess. There's another thing that I want to go over, and that is normals. And I'm not talking about the normals as in the textures that we were talking about earlier, but on the 3D modeling side of thing, we have these things called normals, which affect how faces are displayed on the mesh. Now, this discussion of normals is more about 3D modeling than actual modding fairy tale. But I want to go over it anyway, because normals can affect the appearance of our model in many ways. Let me show you some examples here. So first of all, what is a normal? A normal is essentially the direction in which a face is pointing, and this directly affects how 3D engines render the lighting on that face. You can actually view the direction of these normals by going up to overlays and clicking this little down arrow. And we can go down here and we can click on display normals. We want this one here. This is the face normals. And they're a little hard to see, so let's make them a little longer here. So you can essentially see which direction these are going. I'm just going to turn these off for a second. So there are many instances where when you're working on a model, you may need to merge by distance, essentially take two vertices and reconnect them to each other. So in this model, we can see these themes here. These are created because their vertices are separated. You can see I can pull this apart. This creates this lighting effect in the normals that we can see here. But say in your model, for some reason, you need to merge this just to make things easier or something. You can still do that, but you need to be careful because it will affect this. So I want to go over merging this. If I were to press L here with face selection on, I can select these four sides. And I can go up to mesh and merge by distance. And you can see that I get this, it kind of removes these seams here. But if we go down to this down arrow, we can hit sharp edges and it will actually add these lines here to keep those edges sharp. So that's one workaround for that. The shoulder pad here is another good example to look at. I can select this whole part of the shoulder and I'm going to select up here. And I'm actually just going to select this whole shoulder pad here. And we're going to just merge this into one group. We're going to merge by distance. So I had sharp edges turned on, so it's going to keep everything looking normal. But let's turn that off. And this is an issue that you can run into. If your model has these weird dark faces, it's probably due to some weird shading with the normals like this. If your model does look like this, there are a couple of things you can do to fix this. If you go down to the Object Data Properties tab, and we click on the Normals tab here, there's this option called Auto Smooth. Auto Smooth can directly affect the lighting and overall look of your model. So if I turn this off, you can see that there's some things that could change when I do this. With it off, you can see the seam is more pronounced. With it on, you can see that it's been smoothed out. And then our problem normals look better without this on. If I leave this on and we take the whole mesh and merge by distance, you can see that we have a bunch of problems. So let's actually take a look and see what this would look like if we were to upload it like this. So I'm going to go ahead and export this into Fairytale. Press F10 to reload. And it can be kind of hard to see it because these do have textures on it, so it does hide a lot of the imperfections in the faces. But when you turn it and have the lighting reflect off the sides here, you can really see up here especially the weird shiny effect that we're getting here. And this is obviously a problem with the normals. If I turn off Auto Smooth though, you can see this looks a lot better. And actually, if I were to export it like this, I can press F10 to reload. And it actually turns out pretty good. Interestingly enough, with Auto Smooth turned off and everything merged, this actually looks better than the original for some reason I noticed. So if I press F2 to disable mods and then enable, you can see that the smoothed out one actually has more pronounced outlines, especially if you take a look at this piece here. This is the original. You can see that it kind of cuts out right here. This is how it's supposed to look. Press F2 here to re-enable mods, and you can see that we have more pronounced outlines. Also, the way that the lighting curves around this piece, you can really see the difference here. So these are some options to play with. Auto Smooth, when you're merging by distance, you want to keep sharp edges, or maybe you don't want to keep sharp edges. It really depends on what you're working with. Another obvious thing to look at here is like the face. This is the default face. It has Auto Smooth turned on by default. And if we look at it in game, that's what it's supposed to look like. If I turn off Auto Smooth though, you can see you have way more pronounced facial features. And if I were to export it just like this, we can see how this looks in game. There's more shading around the nose and face area. There's also some more tools that can change normals. I don't use these too often, but if you have some areas, some problem areas, like say, you can see there's this little white area here, and you want to kind of get rid of that. Something you can do is highlight these faces, and we can go up to Mesh, Normals, and you got some options here. You can flip normals, you can, do all this stuff. Something I like to do is like smooth vectors, and we can turn up the factor on this. So you can see that really smoothed out that area there, and that's another option you can do. So if you have messed up normals or some areas you want to individually fix, that's how you would do that. Like this dark spot here, if you're like really picky, we can fix this. We can just come into here, and I've bounded to my favorites menu, so I could just press Q and then go to normals, and we can smooth vectors, and I have it on a factor of 1. And if that wasn't enough, you can apply it a second time. Smooth vectors. And you can see that that's been smoothed out. All right, and that is going to bring us to the end of this video. I hope this has been helpful for some people. I know I'm not the best at describing things sometimes, but I did give it my best, and I hope it will help some people out. If you have any questions, be sure to drop a comment below. I can help down in the comments. You can also drop some comments in the Discord as well, and I check that regularly. I do plan on getting back into costume mods now. So what I might do is record myself doing a mod from start to finish with no commentary or anything, just me doing it from start to finish, uh, just in case anybody wants to kind of see the processes that I go through. But yeah, that's going to be it for today. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one.